Hello, I'm Llewellyn King, the host of ME CFS Alert. I'm so glad today to bring you a success story, an extraordinary young woman who has beaten myalgic encephalomyelitis and now has a very full and productive life. Her name is Kira Taylor, and she comes to us from Brussels, Belgium, where she works as a newspaper reporter, but you will immediately notice that she is English. Kira, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great pleasure. Tell me about your experience with ME. When did you contact? When did you get it? When did you get sick?
So I started getting ill around the age of 11. So I had just like a cold, ear infection, all of that kind of thing. The normal thing you get as an 11-year-old, and just didn't really seem to recover, was getting very, very tired, spent about 6 weeks on the sofa. It was quite a confusing time because I really didn't know what had happened to me. I just moved house as well, so I didn't really have the friendship group that I'd had just before. So it was quite a lonely time. And then, like most people who have ME, I didn't have a diagnosis for, several months after that. And in that period of time, I had a lot of difficulties with my school because they kind of wondered why I wasn't there. And they weren't particularly very good at having a dialogue between the parent and the school. Although some teachers were very good, but the general setup of the school just wasn't able to deal with this. So by the time I got the diagnosis, I was 12, but it was kind of too late for me to have had the support in place, and I deteriorated quite a lot by that point.
Kira, this was in England, right? And whereabouts
Yes.
in England?
So it was in the southwest of England, where I lived with my parents. I have to say, I'm 23 now. It took me 9 years to fully get over the ME. So from the age of 11 to about 20. I got better over time, but for the first 3 or 4 years, I was just very, very tired. I really struggled to do anything more than a couple of hours. I was making maybe 5 hours of school a week. So the really early stages were very isolating like that.
And here you are, 12 years old, and just on your back, more or less.
Yeah. So I was lucky in the respect that I could get up out of bed. My parents were very encouraging to me to get changed out of my pajamas. Some days that was good, some days I really wasn't going to. But yeah, and it was quite a difficult thing for me because the hours I did make going to school, I was a very strange person to the rest of the students because I would just vanish for days on end. And I would have people tell me, "Oh, you're so lucky, you just get to sit home and watch TV." And I can tell you, like, within the first 6 weeks, there was no more TV left. So it really was a very difficult time. But like I said, I was lucky that I was able to get out of bed a little bit. So I started writing stories. I had energy for that. But in terms of going out, I really wasn't able to do much.
Did you do anything else in your difficulty at home? Did you try to keep up with schoolwork? Did you read a lot? What were the symptoms you had besides fatigue?
So the main one was the fatigue and the brain fog, really just aching body. I got a lot of headaches, very strange. I also got colds. Like it was a very weird thing, but I would get a cough or a sneeze, and I think that was related. But really the body aches were the hardest thing, and the headaches as well, because the headaches combined with the brain fog made it very difficult to do anything, let alone the kind of academic school things. So I actually stayed in school for the entire time I had ME, although I actually ended up teaching myself a lot of it because I couldn't make it into classrooms. So either I would be at home or maybe in the school library teaching myself. There were some teachers who provided some material for that and were very good because they said, don't do homework, just try and catch up. But for things like maths and languages, the type of course where you actually have to attend lessons in a row to understand things, I really fell behind. And actually, like you said, I live in Brussels now, and it has been quite a big loss to me that I wasn't able to learn any languages, because I really started from scratch with French here. And again, with my maths, I was provided with a tutor, although I wasn't provided with a room for the tutor. So we were kind of playing ping pong around the school trying to find a room. And she was absolutely lovely. She restored my faith in some schooling, but she was a primary school teacher and I was doing secondary school maths. So there were points where we were both struggling. And in the end, I remember going to my mum about 3 weeks before the exam. I'm going to fail maths. I'm going to be a failure. You know, you need to get maths to get into college. Well, UK college, so 16 to 18. And she said, no, you're not a failure. And I had the proof. I had the 33% on my test. And yeah, so my mum then to teach me maths before my exams so that I could pass them.
You mentioned, Kira, that you had brain fog, but also that you were writing. I mean, were you dyslexic? Was the writing confused, or was it fairly coherent?
I think the type of story writing I did was fairly coherent because it was very much from a more subconscious part of me. I had to make sure I didn't do too much of it because I could get tired without realizing. And also if I multitasked, so if I was texting my friends while writing, or if I was listening to music while writing, I couldn't do that. But any kind of school work or school essay writing, that was a completely different thing, and that was very tiring.
How did you come to get a correct ME diagnosis? We have read and heard that these are not easy to come by in England, that there's a great deal of misdiagnosis, and that the National Health Service has tended to favor the idea that ME is a psychological, not a physical disease.
I had a fairly good GP who I think from the beginning was very open to listening. And from there, I got a hospital referral. And the diagnosis kind of came from there. To be honest, it's a bit fuzzy. My parents mostly dealt with that side of it. But certainly as an 11-year-old, it was quite a moment of reckoning because I'd always seen doctors as the people you went to be cured. You know, you had an illness, you went to the doctor, they gave you something, you got better. And it was really a moment of kind of me realizing that this wasn't something that they could fix. And the kind of amazing status of doctors was suddenly kind of in question for me. Even when I had these hospital appointments, really they were just, how are you? Oh, you're still ill. Okay, come back in a few months. And it was very difficult because
tell you it was psychological and try to divert you to psychiatry?
I never really had that area of it. I had my school mistaking it for misbehavior. And actually I had a recommendation for psychology, but that was more to kind of deal with the trauma that it went through. But again, the UK health system, although very good, the waiting lists for child and teenage psychology were so long that it was 2.5 years later that I even ended up seeing someone. And by that point, a lot of the damage had already been done.
I met you when we were both on assignment in Abu Dhabi, and you seem to be a very vigorous young reporter doing all the things I did many years ago, and no hint that you had been chronically ill for a very long time. When did you start to recover, and do you attribute it to anything particular?
I think I started really making the turning point from being unable to function to functioning, but having the brain fog and having to rest for a while during the exams I had when I was 16, because I had a conversation with my college, and they said the current attendance that you're making at school is not good enough. You cannot come to college on this. They said it in a lovely way, but it was also quite blunt. And I thought, okay, I have to do this. And the pace of the exams kind of forced me into having the adrenaline I think I needed to get through it. And it was very strange. I had this period of maybe 4 weeks when I had my main school exams, and I went into it quite unwell, and I came out of it, and although I was still unwell, something had shifted. And I could not tell you what, and I could not tell you when it happened, but something within those 4 weeks just kind of clicked. And I was making hours which I'd never done before. After that, it was still quite tricky. I still had to have a lot of things in place for exams. I still had to rest after I'd had a busy day, and I then had social anxiety because I'd been so far out of society for so long that even catching a bus was extremely scary for me. And that was actually the thing which then I had alongside the ME for a couple of years after that.
Just getting acquainted with how things work outside of the home.
Yeah, precisely. And I think especially then I went to university and then becoming an adult, I had all of these things that I didn't know whether I was tired because adults were tired or I was tired because I had ME. So all of the normal things that people could refer back to their teenage years and compare them, I just didn't have that ability to do. I did a journalism degree, and that really helped with the social anxiety. But particularly in the first year of it, I was very nervous. I was getting a lot of headaches because I was pushing myself very hard. I was living away from home, so I suddenly had to, do my washing, cook my food, and all of these things. And the first semester at university was extremely challenging.
And in your period of loneliness, did you have anything to help you get through? Some people have pets, some people, cats are very important to some people, dogs to others. Dogs take more care, so if you're living on your own, the dog doesn't really work out. Or any little clues as to how you got through that you can share with other patients?
I had a friend come around once a week, and I used to read my writing to her. So it was a really nice way of both sharing my writing and also having a friend there that I didn't have to talk to her because I was reading what I'd written. I found one-to-one conversations extremely exhausting. So that was really nice. And my parents as well were a very close family. My mum finished work and was looking after me, so she'd actually stopped working to care for me. I also had my faith, which was extremely tested by this period of illness. I think my whole family, I come from a Christian family, all of us were fairly tested. I can't speak for my parents, but I think it was a case for us. But I think certainly the hope that this wasn't forever was extremely important for me, kind of holding on to that.
Besides the writing, did you have any other ways of getting through? I asked you about pets, whether that was a fact. It has been with some people.
My neighbors had a cat who spent more time in our house than in his. And he was certainly a really wonderful companion. He had this amazing ability to know when I was ill almost before I did, and would curl up beside me and purr. But really in those early days, I really lacked anything which would kind of get me through it. And I think I was spending so much time trying to cope with working out what was happening to me that actually the coping mechanisms came in later.
You wrote among your writings, you wrote a fairly seminal article that was published in the Times of London. When was that, and tell us about that?
So when I went to college, I joined a journalism academy because, my path into journalism was really, I wanted to give a voice to the people like me who'd been shut away and weren't able to, voice those things. And I had a really amazing mentor who had a contact with the Times Educational Supplement. And he really encouraged me to write my story in a way that teachers could see what went wrong in my school, and to be honest, in the few cases, what went right, and be able to apply that to their own teaching. And that was a really amazing thing. I published it when I was 16, I think. And to be able to tell people how not to do it, or how to avoid the mistakes that happened with me, was a very cathartic thing.
And do you have any idea why you recovered? Most people do not recover. I've interviewed maybe 150 people, and there are no cases of complete recovery, some partial recovery, some people who are quite functional but have to take a lot of pills regularly and really take very great care of themselves not to become over-exhausted. They tend, in my experience, to have been through a very long, dark tunnel of despair and difficulty and total inability to function, and then to come out not exactly into a sunlit upland, but into a better period in their life, but with fatigue always on the edges. If they go out to dinner, they may not be well the next day, that kind of thing. But this is not true of yourself, is it?
No, I think I get tired normally, like any other adult would. I think for me, I was always told that as a teenager, you had a higher level of recovery. Certainly in the recovery that I had, I would kind of have these peaks and troughs. So I would make progress and then I would go back again, and I would make progress and go back. And always when you slid back, it was really difficult because you thought, this is going to be it. This is going to go back to this, and it's going to plateau at this and never get better. I think it was a combination of, my mum always used to describe it as like pushing the envelope, like just doing a tiny bit more each time. I know for most people that's probably not something which they're able to do, but for me it was kind of going, okay, well, I made it out for half an hour last time, I'll make it out for 45 minutes. And having a lot of safety things in place. So instead of taking public transport, knowing that my parents would pick me up so I didn't have to wait at a bus stop. It kind of always makes people laugh, but I always carry around chocolate with me, because when I crashed, I would have chocolate. So even to this day, I have chocolate, I have Nurofen, all of this stuff in my purse, because I basically had this kind of recovery kit in case I was out and immediately crashed.
Kira, if I had known that when we met, I'd have cadged some chocolate off you.
Actually, I think I had sweets in Abu Dhabi because I was scared that chocolate would melt.
How long have you been fully functional?
I think I noticed it in September 2020. The brain fog went. It was the last thing to go. I'd been fairly functional, like the fatigue had gone. But September 2020, I just thought, I can think again. And it was literally a month before I moved to Brussels. It was a very quick turnaround from like that final thing going to suddenly arriving in Brussels and learning a lot of new things. But yeah, it was that final thing that fell away.
How much do you feel you missed in your teens that you really regret?
There's a lot. I think when I talk to people now who, even things like dating, they just did it and it's so much more normal for them. Pop culture references, I mean, I kind of like old books anyway, so I was always going to miss them out, but you do kind of notice that there are songs maybe that people knew because they went to parties and that I just don't know. I mean, my time at university did kind of allow me to experience some of those things, particularly with the housemates I had. I was kind of able to catch up. But in some ways, I was very advanced from people because, I had quite a lot of maturity from a very young age because I was teaching myself at the age of 12. I was very in tune with my body because I needed to know when I needed to rest, when I could do stuff, when I needed particular foods. But in terms of other things, I was quite innocent and immature. So it took quite a long time to catch up on those things.
And being a reporter in Brussels is fairly rigorous, isn't it?
Yes.
You cover the environment and energy for what publication?
So I'm a freelancer. I do most of my work for a newspaper called You're Active. I also moderate here, so I get to sit and just listen to people talking, and it's amazing. I've done some radio work as well. So it does kind of feel like I've made it, and I've been able to reach where I wanted to get when I was just lying in bed, not able to do things. Actually, the experience I had with Emmy can be quite useful. The two things, so having to teach myself as a journalist, I have to learn quite complex subjects very quickly. So having that experience of teaching myself is very good. And also, I find that I'm much more aware of my body than other people. So I'm really aware of how much coffee I can have compared to how much tea, because the caffeine drives artificial energy, and when I need salt and when I need sugar. So that has been useful. It's a very small silver lining, but I do find that I know those things maybe slightly better than other people.
Do you have siblings?
I don't. I'm actually quite glad, because I feel like it would have been difficult if I'd had siblings. I mean, it did make it more lonely, I think. But it does mean that I'm much closer to my parents and that they were able to help me more.
What would you like to say to other sufferers? Is there any hope you can extend out of your own experience?
I think firstly, you're not alone. A lot of people are going through this, and there is a community out there if you can find it. I think as well that the joy you can find in those brief moments where you have energy, although it may not feel like it's worth all of the tiredness afterwards, if you can hold on to that joy, it at least makes it worthwhile in the moment.
Do you now participate in any Emmy forums or community activities on the web or otherwise?
I haven't had much involvement, although what I do is I tend to talk about Emmy just as it comes up in conversation. And I found that through that, I have people come to me and say, oh, my friend has just had it, or, I know someone with it. And I created a document because I'd started getting so many people asking me about it. I created a little Word document with basically the coping mechanisms that I recommended for them as an adult.
Can we have an address where people can access that document?
Sure, I can share it. I think my email address is on my website, or actually, if you look me up on Twitter, there's a contact.
Well, this is quite extraordinary. You are an exceptional young woman, and I'm hugely impressed. And I'm sure that your story will be of great help to so many who suffer so terribly with this atrocious disease. And I wish you the very best. So glad you joined us. And please come back to Emmy CFS Alert and report on progress, and great luck in your life. And I'm so glad that we ran into each other on assignment.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it. When you mentioned it, it was amazing. And I'm just so grateful that you are running this, because it's so nice to have people actually talking about this.
Thank you very much, Kira. Take care. And until next time, cheers.
Thank you.